Okay, so now we've got everything set up that we need, and we'll go back into or out of isolation mode. And let's have a look at what we've got. So basically we can tweak from here to get it to give it a bit more of a Disney feel. And also improve the lighting. And I think the sand as well looks a bit too hard. So let's click on the sand. I'll rename this actually. Okay, and to give it a bit more softness, I'm going to turn on subsurface scattering. So let's plug this base colour into the subsurface colour. And let's increase the subsurface radius to 1. And you can see straight away it's now got a bit of a soft feel to it. I'd also like to increase the effect of the swirls. So I'm going to actually turn this down first, and then I'm going to increase the size here. And you can see we're getting more of a small swirl pattern. It wouldn't look good from a distance, but at this sort of closeness to the sand, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, and I think I'll multiply these together to give it a bit more of an effect. I've found that if I turn it up in the strength, it can introduce artifacts, although it's not too bad there, so I'll just do it this way. So that's looking pretty good. Maybe just reduce those a little bit. Somewhere about there. And now let's look at the gloss. I want to bring up the gloss a little bit on that sand. So I'll drag this to the right. This is for the gloss ramp. Somewhere about, not too much. Somewhere about there perhaps. I'm going to bring that ocean down a little bit because I've noticed in the background we can see the edge of the ocean. So I'm going to select the ocean, which is this plane. I'll just rename this to ocean. I'm going to bring that down somewhere about there. And now what I can do as well is just rotate the sun a little bit. So I'm going to go into top view and rotate this towards the camera. So this line is pointing towards the camera, which is there. And I'm going into the settings and I'm going to increase that angle to increase the effect on the ocean at the top. And I want to remove the HDRI influence from the sand, from the diffuse. So let's go into the world shader. I'm going to use a light path, which I was surprised works in EEVEE. Not all of it, but some of it. And then I'm going to put a mix RGB down. Put that between the background input and the HDR output. Plug the transmission ray from the light path into the factor of that mix. And then move the HDRI to the bottom. And then we'll turn this to black. And that will reduce the effect on the diffuse. So if I turn it up and down, you'll see we're getting lighting effect from the HDRI. Whereas if I turn it all the way down to black, it's just affecting the transmission only. And just to show that, if I increase this strength now, you'll notice it's increasing the effect of the transmission on Suzanne. So I'll put that back down to maybe 1.2, just to maybe 1 in fact, leave it at 1. Okay, so that's sorted out. It's looking a bit too dark. For a Disney scene, it would be, the colours would be much brighter. So let's go back into the object mode, and we're going to select the volume this time, which is the cube. So I'll just rename this. We'll look at this material. So it's been, if you remember, controlled by this ramp. So this ramp controls whether this is at the top and this is at the bottom, and this just controls how much of each and whereabouts they join on this volume. So I'm going to bring the black area, that's the blue area, to the left, so we get more blue, somewhere about there. And I want to change that colour slightly to have a bit of green in there. Somewhere about probably, somewhere about there. And that'll tie in with the green in the bottom area. So if we go back to the bottom area, we've got this green there. Now, I've rendered it before and I've noticed that this is way too fast. So I'm going to turn the animation of that noise to something like 250. And also, I'm going to get rid of this texture coordinate for the vector. I think I prefer it when it's sort of lines going across. And just to show that, let's bring this across just to get more contrast. And if I bring that scale up, you'll start to see the effect. So that's a good size. And now I've sorted that out, I can bring this back to the right and this all the way to the left, and that will give us a much softer transition. Somewhere probably about there. In fact, I'll give it all the way to the left. I think that's looking much better. Perhaps that sand is probably a little bit too harsh, so we'll go back into the sand again. And we'll just bring that bump down a little bit. And that's softened it back up, so that's looking a bit more sand-like. And the caustics, I think they're a little bit too small, so I'm going to make those bigger by decreasing the scale. And I think they're also a little bit too fine. It's a bit too harsh. So let's go into the caustic group, and we can control that fall off in this color ramp. So I'll drag that to the right, just to make it a little bit wider, somewhere about there. You'll notice that's affected it on EEVEE as well, on Suzanne as well. And I want the volumetrics to sort of affect the Suzanne a bit more. So let's select Suzanne, and I'm going to move Suzanne away from the camera, and then I'm going to move her down a little bit, to about there perhaps. Maybe rotate a bit more. Something maybe about there. And we're also getting this nice effect where the light is casting the shadow into the volume, which I was surprised because it's actually turned off in the settings. So if we go into the volume settings, volumetric shadows is turned off, but I'm still getting volumetric shadows on EEVEE, on Suzanne. I'm not sure why. If you turn it on, it just goes a bit darker, but we still get the volumetric. Anyway, so I think that's looking pretty good now. Maybe I'll increase the density a little bit on the volume. So we'll come into the volume shader, and we'll just turn this up a little bit to get a bit more of an effect. And I'm going to turn the anisotropy a bit to the right, and this will give us more forward scattering. So left is backward scattering, where it's going towards the light, and if to the positive number is going away from the light. So maybe I'm going to go somewhere like this. And then the last thing, in fact that's probably a bit too much, let's go about there. Depends how murky you want the water. I'm going to put it about there. And then I think the last thing is just to increase the intensity of that point light so we can see it a bit more. Let's try 2000. Maybe decrease the radius a little bit as well. Play that back. And another thing that's bothering me is the caustics are yellow. I want those to be more sort of white. So let's go back to the sand again. Into this caustics, where we're mixing the caustics, rather than using an overlay, I'm going to change that to mix. Alright, and now it's white, so we can turn the amount down a little bit, just to make it a bit more subtle, maybe about there, maybe a bit less in fact. And play that back. That's looking pretty good. Let's go into the ocean, into the modifiers. I want to increase the number of subdivisions. Let's turn on overlays. So at the moment, it's playing at 20 frames per second. If I turn this to 2 for the viewport levels, it's going to play at 9 frames a second. So it's going to be a lot slower to render as well. And the reason is it has to calculate this every single frame. And we don't really need to do that. So we're going to apply this by pressing Ctrl A with the mouse hovered over that. And now if we play it back, we're back up to even better performance than we had before. Okay. And let's just bring the strength of the large displacement. I'm going to bring it downwards, just so we get more of those big waves. I think that looks much better. All right, so I think that's looking pretty good. Maybe we could go a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger actually with those waves. Let's try that. And obviously you don't have to get your settings identical to mine, whatever you think looks best. So I'm quite happy with that. Currently, it is a little bit, it's not looking great, but we're going to take care of that in the compositor. After one more tweak that I've just noticed, into the volume, there's no animation on this noise at the top. So we're not getting any sort of movement in the top area, that blue area. So let's just do hashtag frame divided by maybe 220, 230, something like that. And play that back. And let's just check what we've got in here. That's fine. And also, I want to turn on a bit of depth of field. With the camera selected, turn that on. And we can choose where we want the depth of field to, the area of focus to be. And I want that to be Suzanne. So hover my mouse over the focus distance and press E on the keyboard. And then if I click on Suzanne, that will automatically populate this with the distance that Suzanne is from the camera, which is 12.92. Okay, and if I decrease the f-stop, that will increase the amount of depth of field effect. So I'm going to have it somewhere, I want it to be quite subtle, so maybe something like this. And to give it that final bit of pop, what I'm going to do is select the point light and just increase the specular contribution so we get more of an effect on the sand. So let's turn that up to maybe 2. In fact, let's go with something higher, something like 5. So now you can see we've got a really strong effect on that sand, which looks pretty nice. And also I'm going to increase the volumetric contribution as well. So maybe 1.5 for that. Maybe 2. I don't have to go too crazy. I think 1.5 looks pretty good. I mean, you could go as far as 5 and then you're going to get this sort of effect where you get much stronger shadows in the volume as well. So whatever you prefer, but I'm going to leave it at maybe, I think, let's go with 2.5 perhaps. Yeah, 2. Let's go with 2. And with everything finally finished, we can move over to the compositor.